it pretty much boils down to a choice. What do you believe? What do you want to believe? What do you want to see? And where or how do you want to move forward? Not exactly even with your hands and your feet in the beginning, but in your mind and in your heart. You know, who will you be when presented with this situation? All right. Cool.
And we're recording. So, first of all, everybody, thank you for tuning in. This is Tracy Greenwood with Weekly Fascination. I've got Mae Yoshikawa here, and Yogini, mother, instructor, and author. And we're going to have a conversation about several different things, including, you know, how you came to fall in love with yoga, your journey, about your book, and several different things along the way. So, let's get going.
Let's get going. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah. No, it's actually your studio, so thanks for having me here.
Sure, you're welcome.
Yeah, it's a lovely place. I like it, and it's a beautiful, beautiful place. So, you know, we've had a couple of conversations before.
Yes.
And you've been very gracious to offer to let me interview you again. And but one of the things I like to talk about is the journey and becoming. And you have a great story of becoming Mae, or becoming who you are today. And I find it very fascinating, and I'd like to have the listeners hear it too.
Sure.
So tell me from the beginning. What's your story?
From the beginning?
Yeah. Or as much as you want to tell, whatever.
What's the beginning? When I was born?
No, so what I know you for is being a yoga instructor and author.
Uh-huh.
So, you know, you've talked in conversations we've had off air of different events that influenced your life, that led you to write the book, and different things like that. So if you can kind of go through your journey into yoga, first of all.
Why did I start yoga? Well, I started from a very unhealthy place, rock bottom. I was about 21 years old. And let's see, well, a few years prior to that, when I was 14, 15, my parents, after 26 years of a beautiful marriage and 4 kids, got a divorce, which was very, very difficult for all of us involved. And as far as the 4 children went, particularly for me, because I'm the youngest of the 4 siblings, and my 2 sisters and my brother were already older, and they were in university or working for themselves. So I kind of, I took the hit in the mix at home. So that was a really rocky period for me in my teenage years. What happened was that a couple years following that, my mother was diagnosed with a very rare neurological disease that impacted the right hemisphere of her brain. Now, my mother is half American, half Japanese, and she was a lefty. So all of these things, and then also super young onset, because she was 47 when first symptoms started to show, which were symptoms of amnesia and a lack of 3D recognition. So if she were to reach for a glass of water, her hand would reach for the cup but completely miss it, because her brain and her eyes, you know, the recognition wasn't in sync. So these are some of the initial symptoms. And then it took 2 whole years, and 9 different university hospitals to finally come to a full diagnosis, which they called young onset atypical Alzheimer type dementia. But even then, they didn't really know what was going on with her. You know, they just had to put that on the chart so that they would be able to prescribe the right medication. So obviously, this was a very, very difficult time, not just for my mother, but for all of us as family. Meaning that my life also, we had been going through tremendous changes, because I didn't know how much longer my mother was going to remember me or my name or all of the things that she used to do normally, like grab a cup of water or put a stamp on an envelope or cook something on the stove in the kitchen. Like all of these things she couldn't do anymore. Eventually, she lost more abilities, of course, but all of this was very, very stressful to a point where I got sick. I was just emotionally and mentally. I suppose nowadays we would simply say that I was under a tremendous amount of stress. But this is like around, let's see, yeah, late 90s and then 2000. So the word stress, particularly in Japanese culture, it hadn't really been around quite yet. So yeah, I feel like I was just kind of in the dark, and just trying to get by. But all of this led to my depression, my insomnia. I had terrible circulation, so my fingertips and my toes would go numb. And yeah, I couldn't breathe, I couldn't sleep, I wasn't functioning like a normal person. And at a certain point, I said, well, I need to recover my health, or it's not just my mom whose health is going to deteriorate. And in my mom's case, actually, when they reached the final diagnosis with her, they said that it would be terminal. So they said that she would have 10 years tops to live. But I was under so much stress that I thought I would go down with her, So all of this led me to search for something, just anything that would help me to survive this time. And it led me to yoga.
Great. And so what was do you remember your first lesson?
I do.
Please tell me about that.
Yeah. So what happened was I was 21. Well, I was 20 that summer. And I had a boyfriend who was a few years older than me. And one of his best buddies was this Italian guy who was getting married. And he was throwing this big fat Italian wedding. So we flew to Italy in the summer of 2000, where we were attending his wedding. And it's just like this beautiful party and everything, but I was completely depressed inside and desperate, to find something, anything to help me. And I remember looking around at the party at anyone who might look healthy, that might look like they're doing something for their health. And I saw this girl standing straight in her dress with these beautiful legs, like skinny but strong, and you could tell that she must be doing some form of training. So even though I haven't been very extroverted for most of my life, on that particular occasion, from this dark tunnel of desperation, I approached her and I asked her, what kind of training do you do? And she turned out to be an Aussie girl, and she turned around with her Aussie accent and she said, I do Pilates 3 times a week. And I was like, what? I hadn't heard of Pilates before. Pilates had not entered Japan yet at the time. And she explained to me that Pilates is basically core training that you do, and it works similarly to yoga, but in Pilates we use more equipment and stuff. So I came back to Tokyo that summer from Italy and looked everywhere for Pilates, but it just didn't exist in Japan yet. But I didn't want to give up also because I was so desperate. And then I remembered that she said that Pilates was similar to yoga. So I started looking for yoga studios. And even then, at the time, I could find only 3 yoga studios in all of the Tokyo metropolitan areas.
Only 3?
Only 3, which is a huge surprise, right? Like 21 years ago.
Okay.
One was going to be too far for me to commute to. And then the other 2, I checked out both studios. I ended up going to Ken Harakuma's studio, which is called International Yoga Center. Yeah, and that's where I experienced my first yoga class.
And what was that like?
That was a killer. So I was really nervous about the first yoga class. I had no idea what to expect, and I didn't want to go alone. So I asked my sister if she wanted to come with me. I have two sisters, and this is the older one that I asked. And so she's like, yeah, sure. And she came with me. And so my sister is quite a character. She just, and also a major bargain shopper, I guess. And so we walked into the studio. We've never done any yoga, but she's like, oh, well, these are cheaper. So she goes ahead and buys like a set of 11 tickets because that way she can buy it for the price of 10. And she used one ticket for herself and one for me. And we took this yoga class, except it was a primary led class. So for anyone that knows Ashtanga yoga, like primary series led class is a full on 90 minutes rigorous, almost like military style sequential, like non-stop movement of breath and asanas, the postures. So I walked into this class and there's like mostly foreigners around us, I guess. Not very many Japanese people practicing yoga at the time. People breathing like heavily. And my sister and I started taking this yoga class. And I had done a lot of sports in my middle school and high school years. Of course, after that, I had hit rock bottom in terms of my physical health. But I was astonished because I hardly lasted 15 minutes with this synchronized breath and movement flow. I couldn't keep up. My breathing couldn't keep up with the movement, or my movement couldn't keep up with breathing. Either way, it wasn't working. And I was just knocked out, basically. I remember Ken, my teacher, my first teacher, came up to me after like, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes of the first sequence. And he was like, that's enough for today. You may stop and lie down and take rest. And I was thinking in my heart, like, are you serious, dude? I paid for the whole class, you know? But even then, I was wiped. I wanted to continue, but I had had enough. He was right. So I lay down to rest. And that was when I almost fell asleep. So for an insomniac, for a depressed insomniac to have tried everything and failed and to almost fall asleep on a rental flappy yoga mat with some bunch of foreigners like breathing heavily around you.
Yeah, I can't sleep with other people around,
Right.
especially strangers.
Right, you know, so I was shocked how simple and effective it could all be. So the funny thing is, right, I have no recollection of how my sister was handling that class because I was so busy with myself. But as we completed the class and as we were getting out of there, I remember she looked completely exhausted. And she just gave me the remainder of the tickets. And she was like, here, you can have these. I'm never coming back. So
see ya.
I got the rest of the tickets. And that's how my yoga journey started.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. And did you...
Right. I could have been a Pilates teacher.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Wow. Might have been a different trajectory, but I think you still would have excelled at it. So.
Thanks.
And so I've heard other people talk offline, but like, and maybe I tend to jump ahead. So if I were to say like, wow, if I really like yoga, what if I want to teach? Like, how do I become a teacher? Or if I walk into a karate studio, I think like, how do I get my black belt? You know, I don't think of like the stuff in between, but is there a certain process of like when you start learning and then you get to a point where you teach, like, did you decide to become a teacher or were you called to become a teacher? That's my real question is like, how did you start teaching? Right.
So the truth is that yoga teaching was hardly a job when I started, right? Okay, so this is 2001 in Japan. So, and like I said, there were 3 yoga studios in all of the Tokyo metropolitan areas, meaning being a yoga instructor was not a job. It didn't exist. Like you couldn't, you know, bring home the bacon, so to speak. I was just a desperate child trying to help myself. And so, no, I never thought about becoming a teacher. I guess I didn't even really have any sense of considering it as a job or an objective. But I just kept going back to the classes because it made me better. Initially, it helped me to sleep. And then I remember how it helped me to breathe. And then I learned that breathing deep and sleeping deep go together. And then I learned that the way my mind was working, or malfunctioning, shall we say, with all of the crazy, overactive thoughts, right, has everything to do with the way I'm breathing. I also learned that the way I eat affects the way I breathe. And all of these things, holistically, the way that I am, the way that I be. So yoga gave me a spine to this blurry search, even the sense of health. If you ask people today, like, what does health mean to you? People generally have a sense that you need mental health, you need emotional health, as well as physical health, like a holistic being. But 20 years ago, I don't think that was quite the case. I think it was a little bit more fragmented. People considered health to be something of the body.
I can pass my health check. My blood panel's good. I don't have high cholesterol. I don't have diabetes. I can go another year.
Right, like observing your mind or mindfulness and these kinds of things, they weren't really in our awareness quite yet. So I just kept going back to the classes and showing up and really feeling and experiencing for myself the improvement in my own state. Then around 2004, 2005, what they call the yoga boom period arrived in Japan. So there were studios opening left and right, and Ken was expanding his business, and they obviously would have a shortage of teachers and would need all of the teachers to fill these classes up. And I think I was one of the earlier sort of batch of students that he approached and said, "Would you like to teach?"
And how did that feel?
And I said,
what did you think?
I don't know if I was really thinking. I felt honored, for sure, because I had only been practicing like maybe a year and a half at the time, but I was getting hardcore into it, as in like, doing early morning practice maybe 5 or 6 days a week. So I felt honored, like he had acknowledged my practice. But I also felt completely unsure, because I just started yesterday and you want me to teach other people, and not to mention I was still a university student. So all of my students would be older than me and, at least have more life experience than me. So and I was beginning to have this sense that yoga is not just a doing of physical asanas, but also a way of living, and just something much bigger and deeper than, and I had just taken a teeny bite, But I didn't say yes, but I also didn't say no. I said, I'll think about it.
Okay.
So I took it home and I sat with it for a while, because I didn't want to like suddenly start teaching, many times a week, like many other people did actually at the time. But I also felt like something tugged at me enough I felt like if I started teaching, I would learn more and faster myself. And especially with Ashtanga yoga, which is what I had specialized in, is a whole sequence of postures that come in series. And it's one breath, one vinyasa, like one movement and one flow. So there's a whole system of counting the numbers that go with it, counting the breath, and as well as the posture names in Sanskrit. And usually for any beginner, all of that is quite ambiguous. But as you become a teacher, then you have to count them out loud. You have to call them. You have to call them accurately. So I told him that I would take one class just once a week. And basically, I kind of pushed myself to learn more. And it was completely selfish. I knew that I was doing this for myself and not like for anybody else.
Okay, cool. So then Um, years later, you have a yoga studio in Aoyama,
Right.
and you're teaching, and then
Yeah, so let's see, how did that go? So in the beginning, right, Ken used to go to South India, to Mysore, to study with the founder of Ashtanga Yoga, Sri K. Patabi Joyce. And as a young woman, I saw that my teacher would take like a whole month off to go to India. He'll just like leave us and go to India. And that's how we felt. We felt abandoned. Like if we're practicing at a studio 5 days, 6 days out of the week, every day, it becomes like a second home to us. And then he what? Leaves us for a whole month? But that was the example that he had set for us, which made me wonder, who is his teacher, right?
yeah,
And because I could speak and understand English, I think it was a relatively natural course for my curiosity to say, hey, do you want to meet your teacher's teacher, or, or travel to India and practice at the feet of the guru, as they say.
in Mysore.
Right. So I started doing that. The first trip I made to Mysore was in 2004. And then, yeah, as fate would have it, I guess, in 2006, so very early, I was authorized by Sri K. Patabi Joyce, as well as his grandson, Sharat, to teach the Ashtanga Yoga method. So, and incidentally, after I became the first Japanese woman to be authorized just after Ken, right? So, yeah, I guess I kind of started early, and I started going to India relatively early. And then once I had that blessing with me, I felt much more like I had kind of walked into this role of being a teacher. Until then, I always felt, in Japanese, they would say ushiro metai. I felt slightly backward, slightly not enough about me being this little young girl teaching this colossal tradition of yoga. And so I always felt like I was a little unworthy or just not enough. But after I was authorized by Guruji, I felt like I kind of stepped into the role with his blessing. Yeah, and then I had this period of time where I would travel around and teach in different regions in Japan. And then eventually, my first pregnancy and birth with Isa, my son, which was followed by a very difficult divorce. And so all of these kind of life events, my personal life events, led me to come back to Tokyo. And of course, with child in tow, you're doing a lot less traveling.
Yeah.
So it kind of inspired me to hunker down and start teaching a regular program in my hometown of Tokyo.
Okay, great. So then is that when you opened up the studio in Aoyama?
No, actually, I wouldn't even commit to that
Okay.
in the beginning. I started teaching a regular morning program for women only in the beginning, because I was a single mom with this baby, and I just but teaching morning yoga classes is a lot of heavy lifting. So it was kind of a practical decision for me at first to make it a women only thing. So I started this program in 2010. That's also when I started my company. And around the same time, actually, my father had been diagnosed with advanced prostate cancer. So that was kind of something that was happening in parallel to my divorce and all of that. But basically, I had this sick father on the one hand, and then this fresh baby on the other hand, and I needed to work my butt off. But I needed to do it in a way that would balance out my lifestyle, helping out my dad, and then with the child. Of course, many times my dad helped with the child too, but So in the beginning, I was just renting this space out of a local yoga center that would just let me use their space in the early morning hours. Um, and I had a very successful program. Then what happened was that the space that I was renting, they had some changes with the building and they were going to move. The studio itself was going to move, and the place they were moving to wasn't going to work for me. So I needed to quickly find another place. So I went looking for another place, but I couldn't find a suitable place. And I already had the students, I already had the program. And then I have this really good friend of mine who's kind of have has been key in giving me business advice, I guess. And he kind of nudged me and said, you know, May, I think it's time you open your own space. So that's when I started looking for like longer term leases, and that's how I found my space in Omotesando.
Nice, nice. And how long were you there?
10 whole years. So we opened in March of 2011, which, if you were in this part of the world, it rings a bell because on March 11th of 2011, it was the great East Japan earthquake and tsunami disaster. So that happened only a fresh week after I had opened the studio, which, right, which was, I don't know.
And it seems like, because we've talked about this before, is it seems like every time there's a change in your life, there's also a shift in the world or something, right? Is that accurate?
I think what you're remembering is one of our conversations when I was telling you, and obviously all in hindsight, but when I look back, right, I remember the exact time when I first started yoga. It was September of 2001. Right. Obviously, that sets up.
As an American, that really
right.
makes sense to me. Yeah.
Yeah. So I remember I had just come home from, I don't know, my second or third yoga class or something, and turned on the TV, and I don't even have words to describe what we were all looking at the time. But we all knew that the world was never going to be the same again. And, you know, my world had already been upside down with my mother's diagnosis and all of that. But something made me feel this tremendous shift that was going on inside me as well as outside of me in the world. And I knew that it was just the right time for me to start yoga, right? It was just something that I would hang on to and keep close to my heart and my hara as I learned to monitor my breath. I relearned to breathe, and to breathe freely, and to maintain my own through all of the internal and external changes of our lives. So that was 2001. And then, as I told you a little bit earlier, my first trip to India was in 2004.
Okay.
This was actually in December 2004. And if you're traveling from Japan to South India, we were flying into Bangalore, but there are no direct flights from Tokyo to Bangalore. So we flew through Thailand. We, as in my then partner and I. And it was around Christmas time, so we thought we'd take a few days off before flying into Mysore, up to Bangalore, and then to go into Mysore. So we were spending a few days on Petong Beach in Phuket.
Okay.
Having a great time, you know, sipping our Mai Tais or whatever. And in fact, I was having such a great time that I suggested that we extend our stay in Thailand for a few more days, except we had purchased some fixed tickets, so we couldn't. And so I believe we flew out on like the 23rd of December, 2004 or something, and then flew from Bangkok into Bangalore, and then took a car into Mysore. And then, of course, in the beginning, like when we stayed in the hotels, we didn't have any TV or anything. But in the following days, we found out that the great Sumatran earthquake, tsunami had wiped out that entire side of the world. And we had just missed it, like the day prior. So that was really shocking. But again, something, I just felt so protected, I guess you could say, like even saved. I would always be on this side of the event, not that side.
The other side, yeah.
Yeah. So that was 2004. And then a number of years later, of course, I opened my studio in Omotesando in March of 2011. And then a week after that, the Great East Japan earthquake and tsunami disaster. So in this case, I felt like, had the earthquake happened a week prior to my opening the studio, I might have backed out, because I knew that business would be so difficult. That's if we would figure that Tokyo would even be safe enough to live in, right? Because we had all of the nuclear plants in Fukushima that were in a very precarious situation. So, but no, I had already opened the studio, and then the disaster happened. So something inside me kept telling me that it just wasn't time to quit. That myself included, that the people would need the yoga and would need the meditation now more than ever. So yeah, a weird kind of relationship.
It's almost
there.
like you feel compelled. Is that the right word? Or on a mission or something? Or
there's a sense of purpose that developed in me through each of these occurrences. It's definitely been a development. It's not like like I said, I wasn't even interested in becoming a teacher, period. So I was only interested in furthering my own studies and practice of yoga. So, I never had a dream or any plan of opening my studio or becoming this business person. I never had any of that. It was all kind of like upside down for me. I had the practice, and then I had the people, the community first, and then the community needed a space, and then I got the space lastly. Yeah.
Wow. But obviously there's a lot of work involved, but then it seems like things, what do they say, that when opportunity meets success is when opportunity meets effort. Is that kind of what we're describing here? We can always edit that out because that didn't work.
Success? But say that again? Are you quoting someone?
Yeah, I'm trying to. When opportunity meets preparation.
Oh, are you trying to quote something that I was telling you before?
You said that before, but I've heard it.
No, I think I was telling you. No, I heard it like from Oprah or something, where it's like she doesn't believe in luck.
Yeah.
Some people say, oh, you were lucky,
so
or whatever,
lucky.
but I think I was telling you about how I heard Oprah once say that luck is when opportunity meets preparation.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or I guess other people call it luck. Yeah, but without the preparation, you would never catch the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, that they say like an overnight success. Somebody like the Beatles, right? When they blew up in the U.S., they had been playing in Germany for years and years and years, and then went back to England, and they were really super tight after having played, several shows every day for years, and then they come over to America, and people say, "Oh, it's this overnight sensation," but it takes like 10 years, and then overnight, right?
Right. Sure. I never even thought of my own self in that way in terms of success. Like my business, and it's pretty small scale, So I think that one of my purposes has to do with building community and sharing from who I am. It's quite challenging in Japan because here, once you start teaching, you automatically become sensei. And then there's a cultural background that so easily puts me up on a pedestal. But I don't think I ever really wanted to be up on that pedestal. I wanted to be with people and organically working together. And, even when I opened my studio in 2011, like I said, I had no like business plan, or, I didn't have like the right way to do things. I just had enough money to to take a lease out on this beautiful place. I had no furniture. I had nothing. So I went to IKEA at first and got some furniture and whatever, and then but I didn't even know how to put all of the pieces together. And when you're running a yoga studio, especially in my case, like I was running a female only program in the beginning, so I had all of the women, but we needed some guys to come in and help us move furniture and put stuff together. So I think I had like three, bless their hearts, three male students, and they all showed up and they helped me put the furniture together. And yeah, but it was, but even the first day that I got the keys for that place, if you were a business person in your right mind, you would never take all of your customers on this, into your space, to your empty, cold space with no furniture. But I was like, look, everyone, I got the key. Let's go together. And so we were just like one big family,
Awesome.
and yeah, so that's how the community grew, I think.
But a yoga studio, how much furniture do you need anyway?
Not a lot, but we just needed shelves for the yoga mats, and then we needed like a little countertop for the
reception or
reception.
something. Okay.
We had a table for the meeting area. Yeah, and then like some shelves in the locker room and stuff. But yeah.
Okay. I see. Yeah. Because when I think of yoga, I think of a place to put mats, right? Like a studio. But it does make sense. You would have to have more.
Yeah, you never
stuff.
really think about it until you
Not
have
really.
to.
And it makes sense because I've never had a yoga studio. So
You've been in one, though.
I've been in one, a lovely one.
Thanks.
I love that place. So now the yoga studio, pandemic hits, and then...
Right. So after 10 years of running the studio in Omotesando, and so many beautiful people coming in and practicing with us and meditating and changing their lives and all that good stuff, finding some of their best friends, Well, I guess something that a lot of people don't know is that when I started the studio in 2011, I said to myself in my own heart that I would run a studio for at least 10 years.
Wow, you called it.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because when I say that, some people say like, whoa, that's a long time. Or some people say like, what, you intended to quit in 10 years? Didn't you plan on doing it indefinitely? Or, people have different ideas about it. But my thing was that I knew that my son Isa would be 10, 11 by then. And as long as I am running a studio and teaching morning program and stuff, then we wouldn't really be able to move very far away in terms of location in Tokyo. So I just wanted to give myself, my children and my family a chance to reevaluate, instead of committing automatically. So it was this vague idea that went alongside my sense of being a mom and in a family and a business owner and a teacher, right? But I should also mention that, so after divorce with Isa's biological father, in my mid-30s, I was remarried to a beautiful man, and we welcomed our second son, Aiden, in 2017. And not too long after that, my husband was involved in a traffic accident, and he died immediately. So this was a hugely shocking event in my life and in our family. And it took me out of work for a long time because I just didn't feel like I could, show up and be a teacher. I didn't want to put on a mask I didn't want to have to make myself be strong, through my early days of grief. So I took a long bereavement leave. And during this time, other teachers were teaching at my studio and my staff were helping to run the studio. But I also, I needed to step back and allow myself a chance to be reborn or a chance to be new, because the future, the life in the future that I had envisioned with my husband and with the children, it wouldn't be what we thought it was going to be, right? So somewhere during my long bereavement leave, I didn't know how I would come back to the scene in terms of work. But then COVID hit in 2020. And when COVID hit, I don't know if you guys, maybe some of the listeners, if you have a visceral sense of remembrance that those initial weeks, months of when COVID hit, I mean, people were freaked out.
Oh, yeah. Terrified. Yeah.
Terrified. And there was just so much chaos outside and inside. Job loss, insecurity, sickness, grief, financial insecurities, just a lot of anxiety, insomnia, depression, all of which I was completely familiar with. Right?
Yep.
So in some crazy way, when COVID hit, I was like, this is so 2 years ago. I had on a personal level, gone through all of these things through my grief and sudden loss. So what happened was, on sheer impulse, I wanted to make a comeback and really be there for the community and be there for the people and really start teaching yoga and meditation and breathing. And because I knew, if anything, how to stay sane in times of uncertainty. So I immediately made a decision to temporarily close the studio because I wasn't going to take any unnecessary risks in terms of trying to run these classes out of the physical location of the studio. And my staff were brilliant in helping me to shift my programs online. So we got to that very early, in early April 2020. So we only took weeks before we started shifting our programs online. Other studios were still kind of like, trying to figure out if we should close or open. But we just shifted online really, really quickly. Also, not just for the students in the community, but also to maintain jobs for our instructors. Yeah. So that was kind of my weird comeback to the work scene from my bereavement leave. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So that's definitely a calling, Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So it's kind of like when people are freaking out, you're like, I've been here. I got this. Right?
Well, I don't get freaked out. Let's put it that way. I don't. Because one of the greatest reasons why people get freaked out, people always get most freaked out the first time. Every time, right? It's not, you get a little bit less freaked out the second time and the third time if you're learning from your experience. So I don't claim to know everything, but I can tell you what I know from my experience. So instead of breathing like that, you should breathe like this. There you go. You're a little bit calmer. Oh, you can't sleep? What if you breathe like this? There you go. Now you can sleep. So I can hold your hand through this because I've held my own and I've held my kids' hands through this. Yeah.
Wow. So the book.
Right.
Seamless transition right into but
can you at least finish your question? Because you give me a word.
Okay.
Like a book. And then I'm like, fill in the blank. I was like, okay,
So I'm
waiting
trying
for
to
the
think of a
next.
segue, but because I want to get to this part. But so you've written a book. Please tell me about your book and
Yes.
how did it come about? No spoilers, but and how did it come about, and what did it mean for you as you were doing
Yeah.
it, and the process and everything?
Yeah. So writing has been my other love. Yoga and meditation and all of that is what usually gets a lot of the attention. But writing, I fell in love with as early as, I would say, first grade. I've had this little callus on my finger on my right hand because I've always loved to hold a pen or a pencil and be in the action of writing. The first time anything I wrote was published was back in 2004, and that's through my work with Yogini magazine. I started working with the team at Yogini magazine is Japan's first yoga magazine, and I was initially hired as their cover model. But I went to the editor myself and I said to him that I wanted to write. And he wasn't so excited about it at first, but I got around to convincing him. And then he said, if you write a column about your journey and experience with yoga, then I'm sure the readers would like to know about that. So why don't you give it a go? So that's how I wrote my first column. Turns out they loved it. And thank you to all the readers that wrote the magazine and expressed their, love for this column, because then it led to my second column. And then I kept writing for the quarterly magazine for the next 10 years.
Wow.
It was, yeah. So that's how the writing career part started. It was so important for me to express what was happening to me on the inside. Because through all of the photography and the visual representation, I could show how beautiful or even comfortable and wonderful and aligned yoga looks. But more importantly, what is it doing to the inside of me? What's happening to my mind? What lifestyle changes am I making? What am I eating or not eating? What about pregnancy? What about birth? What about love? What about divorce? All of these things that I just like to be authentic about.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to, express and share my experience through the column. So I have 2 published books in Japanese. One is a collection of my blog essays, and that's largely like yoga lifestyle stuff. And then the second was by NHK Shuppan, so that was a true honor. That's like the Japanese national publication company. And that was more like a handbook of Ashtanga yoga, and then also tying into the lifestyle of yoga. And then this final book, the third book that you're talking about, is the first book that I ever wrote in English. And this has been something else, because I wrote this book in my months of grief following the loss of my husband. And if anyone's ever known that kind of grief, first of all, I feel you. And I know that you don't know up from down. You don't know left from right. You don't know anything. And along with yoga and meditation, writing was something that really just helped to ground me and keep me sane. It's also because then it allows you to reflect on your emotions and your experience, and you're not only in it. You're not only in the turbulence, but you're also then reflecting on the turbulence as you're writing about it, right? So I took 10 months in my extended bereavement leave. I guess I wasn't doing nothing. I was creating something that's so dear and close to my heart. And I took 10 months and I completed this manuscript. And in America, the publishing world works so differently from the way it is here in Japan. But after finishing the book, then I needed to get to work on the book proposal, which is basically like this thick business document that you use to pitch to agents and publishing houses and whatnot. So, yeah, and I had just completed the proposal when COVID hit.
Okay.
So that kind of got put at bay a little bit while I needed to shift myself into my work with Veda, my studio, and then putting it online and yeah, pulling through the first year of COVID.
Okay. And so what can you tell me about, not about the contents, but like the progress, what's going on?
So what's going on is, so now this is like the extended phase, right? Because I had to really commit myself to the Japan business side of things for like the first year and a half. But then I'm needing to juggle a little bit. So I'm still teaching with Veda online, pretty much like half of the week or a little bit more. And then in my spare time, I put into polishing my manuscript and then now revising the proposal and pitching it to agents. So that's where we're at.
Excellent. So maybe we can have another podcast when it's published. And
I would love that.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Me too.
Yeah.
I'd love to see it published.
Yes.
And also I dig talking to you. So like it'd be fun to have another podcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So one time we had talked offline before, and you mentioned, and I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation, but Jugad. Am I getting close to it?
Yes.
Right? And please tell me about that concept and what it means, and maybe some examples.
Sure. So Jugad is, I believe it's a Hindi word that I learned a number of years ago through a friend, actually. And it's the idea of a person who is capable of shifting perspective to make the best out of whatever opportunity that presents itself in front of you. So say, for example, you're walking along the street and you need to get from point A to point B. And you're walking towards B, but it turns out, oh my goodness, there's a major cliff here, and there's no way I can get to point B. And then what do? What do most people do when presented with a situation that looks like doomsday, like it's over? Do you pick up and go home? Do you sit there and sob about it? Do you whine about it? Do you complain about it? Do you go home and study about it? Like, what do you do? Like, what's your go-to MO? I believe it's Emerson, right, who said every wall is a door. Kind of works similarly, where if you would have the guts to walk right up to the wall, the seeming obstacle in front of you, maybe, just maybe, it presents you with another option. So a jugad, I believe, the concept is that when presented with this opportunity that looks like a wall or a major obstacle in front of you, instead of giving up, instead of whining, complaining, shrinking, a jugad is someone who shifts their perspective to think positively. Like, well, if I can't walk there, then can I swim there? Can I fly there? Do I have a friend who can fly? Or, can I hire a helicopter? Or wait, maybe I can train and learn to fly, or anything.
Yeah.
Anything. But that kind of thinking, that kind of mind is what gets you to point B.
I notice, what do they say? It's following the path of least resistance is what makes people and rivers weak. And I don't know if this is related to the concept, but it seems that for me, if there's an obstacle and I get around it, the journey is like, you have a better story after the journey's over, right? Like, everybody's got that story of like when they went camping and they're planning on looking at the stars, and then it starts raining or something, and then they have to sleep in the car. Or Like you're planning on doing something and then a disaster happens and then you improvise and get around it. And then you have a great story, right?
Sure.
So I hope I'm close to hitting the nail on the head, but
yeah, I mean, but the story comes way afterwards.
Oh, yeah.
Like when you're standing there at the cliff or in front of the wall or whatever seeming obstacle in front of your face, you're not thinking, oh, this would make a great story later. You're just, I mean, chances are you're not. Like the bigger the obstacle, the less likely, right?
Exactly, yeah.
I can't speak for other people, but in my case, it's like, what are the options really? Are you going to sit there and sob about it? Are you going to go home and complain about it? Are you going to call someone and like, I don't know, tell them, share your anger and spread anger? Like what are your options really? And so, and I guess I'm just on my way learning these things through life experience, but really it pretty much boils down to a choice. What do you believe? What do you want to believe? What do you want to see? And where or how do you want to move forward? Not exactly even with your hands and your feet in the beginning, but in your mind and in your heart. You know, who will you be when presented with this situation? Yeah, wow.
I'm speechless, and that's pretty rare for me. Wow.
I saw your mouth move.
Yeah. Sorry. For listeners, I was mouthing the word wow. Yeah, you always blow my mind whenever we talk. Like, you always say something that leaves me kind of thinking, like, I'm going to have to listen back to this and digest that, because there's so much good, like, content in there to listen to again. I can see myself listening to this again.
Yeah. No, but that's just for me what it's boiled down to in experience, you know. And the yoga and the meditation, the tradition, the practice has largely given me a discipline to really dive into some of these deeper concepts. But in my heart, I know that regardless of the yoga or regardless of whether you're meditating or not, life will show you. Because if you're one of those people, and again, listeners, I feel for you, like if you are like, shit, it's okay? Okay. If you're like, shit, I'm a complainer, man. And if you're like, oh man, I was just complaining about my totally cush, like white collar office job and, you know, and then, you know, whatever it is. I just want to say 100% I've been there. In fact, this is a great time to reminisce. Like when I first started practicing yoga, and this is, you know, when I had that wipeout experience in Ken's studio in the early days. So my first teacher, Ken Harakuma, fascinating guy. I haven't seen him in a number of years, but he used to be an explorer. Do you know this?
No.
He used to be a tankenka explorer traveling the world before he became a yoga teacher. As in, he's climbed Kilimanjaro. He has been to the North Pole. And that means, I believe he had to travel with like, you know, obviously you don't travel alone. You travel with like a trained team on like, I think you have to take a helicopter to the nearest glacier floating around there. And then you have to like, I don't know, trek and hike your way there. So fascinating stories. But, and I have so many stories I could tell you about that. But for this purpose, I'm going to stick to the part where as a yoga teacher who was teaching my morning yoga classes that I used to go to, he had like 3 tank tops that he would wear on repeat, you know? And one of them was this tank top that said, within quotation marks, "I will not complain."
I love it.
Right? So I think I was like 21 maybe. Yeah, I feel like I was still in university. as in I would complain about everything. I would complain about my homework. I would complain about not having money. I would complain about that hurts, and then like that sucks, and like, I don't know, whatever. But I would show up from my yoga class in the morning, and without saying anything, his tank top would say, "I will not complain." And then I would think to myself, "What the fuck?" Right? But it just caught my attention. And so I remember I asked him, I was like, "What's this tank top?" And he told me that the team, if I remember this correctly, but the team that he used to travel and do these explorations with, I believe the team's name was "I will not complain,"
Wow.
or their slogan was, or something
Yeah.
like that. So the tank top belonged to that team. But I took it to heart. I said to myself at some point, you know what? I will not complain. I'm just going to try to stop complaining. And the face you're making tells me that you know how hard it is.
Yeah.
You know how hard it is to not complain. It's one thing to not complain with your mouth as you exhale and speak complaints, but it's a whole other thing to not complain in your mind.
That internal dialogue.
Yes.
This sucks.
Yes.
What am I doing here? Why me?
The internal narrator.
Yep.
The ceaseless flow of thoughts that so easily veer towards negativity.
Well, I've fired the narrator several times. Just keeps coming back to work.
I was going to say, how do you fire yourself or your mind?
Like that chatter. Well, first of all, so I don't do yoga, you know this, and eventually you'll probably get me. But
I would disagree to that, but yeah, go ahead.
But I don't do yoga, but I've done other things like martial arts, jiu-jitsu, and I'm doing a program right now with some friends. May talk about that later, but after a really good roll on the mats, like when you wrestle with somebody who's better and you get strangled, and you're simulating like a death struggle, right? When you do jiu-jitsu, and I'm not an expert. I'm a white belt, and probably will die a white belt, but after something like that much exertion, I remember walking out of the dojo one time, and I have a thing. I grew up in a small town, and always lots of space between people, and big parking spaces. You never park next to anybody. Always lots of space. And in big cities, you're constantly rubbing shoulders with a lot of people, a lot of cars, a lot of activity, fast paced. I remember walking out of the dojo after rolling one time, and a taxi came too close to me, and it was probably a meter, but in my mind it's like he almost killed me, but I remember I was so exhausted, and the taxi went by in front of me. I just thought, oh, taxi, whatever. And it was just that. For me, I have like this very, very active brain, and I'm super sensitive, and I tend to overreact. So it takes me to get into a state where I can just let stuff happen around me. I need to really exert myself.
Well, that's one way to do it.
It's
not
one
the
way,
only
yeah.
way.
Not the only way. No. And
Right.
so I can see you kind of like smiling as I'm saying that, but that's just one way to do it.
Yeah.
But no, so after things like that, the narrator just kind of quiets down for a while. But please tell me your experience. This is about you, not me. So.
No, I was gonna say the narrator quiets down for a while, and then what though?
It just comes back to work.
It comes back to work. Does it come back with a vengeance?
Nah, it kind of comes back. Hey, I'm here. Anybody here?
Right.
It starts to come back, and then for me, I learned the acronym HALT.
Yes.
Hungry, angry, lonely, tired.
Yes.
In those situations, I feel more vulnerable.
For sure.
And if I'm hungry, or I used to say hangry, or hungry, angry, lonely, tired, and tired is a big one for me because I work a lot of hours. And for you as a mom, I mean, you must have had several nights where you're up changing diapers and nursing, and then
but now I'm in bed at 9:30 with them.
See, there you go, right?
So yeah, I've definitely had phases too, but I can for sure say that in the last 20 plus years of practice, my relationship to the internal narrative has changed completely. It's not like, I wouldn't say it's complete or it's done in any way, but I would definitely say it's thoroughly amicable. I'm very kind to my yapping mind. And if my mind wants to complain, or maybe in the beginning, if it begins to veer towards compulsively complaining, like you, I just halt and I say, oh, you're tired. Let's go to sleep instead. Or, would you like a long bath? And so that's self-care. So another way to say that is to say that I'm extremely good at self-care now, especially compared to how I used to suck at it. And that goes to all of us, right? So parenting your children is one thing, but parenting your inner self, that's where the real work is.
Yeah.
And so once I started to really love myself in that way, to care for the wounded, the uncared for, the lonely, the angry, the sad parts of myself, the pieces of myself. They're not just sad. They're not just angry. They're angry because why? They're sad because why? And there's always, I learned that every emotion, including all of the ones, especially all of the ones that you're wanting to avoid and run away from, such as anger, depression, loneliness, suicidal thoughts. Like, I learned that every contracting, hard emotion is kind of like a messenger. I learned that they're not just there. It's not like some accident and you're victimized by your own emotions. They're there because they're showing me something. So instead of turning my eyes away from them, turning my attention away from them, or wanting to hide from them, or wanting to, God forbid, kill your emotions, I think we all kind of go through that phase too.
Or stuff the emotions, right?
Stuff the emotions. Yeah, get rid of them, because I learned very quickly that doesn't work. Then instead of moving away from them, I learned through practice to approach them. And now I approach them with so much compassion and so much spaciousness that the angry child, the crying child, the loneliness, the depression, they just melt into my arms and into my spaciousness to say, like, thanks for listening to me. This is how I'm actually feeling. And then if I'm making this conversation up as I go, but this is like an energetic dialogue that goes on. And then my compassion, my spaciousness, my mindfulness says, why? Why are you sad? And then the emotions say the thought that is beneath the emotion. As in, say if I'm feeling tremendous grief for the loss of my husband, for the loss of a loved one. And, usually everyone wants to run away from grief. Everyone wants to run away from anger. But instead I approach it and I say, hey, why are you feeling these things? And then the emotion will say something like, well, he's not here. He's not here. He's not here. He's gone. It's over. I want to die too, or whatever, all of these thoughts that go along with the feeling. See, thoughts are a little bit more material than the emotions are, though. The emotions are kind of like energetic clouds. They're just murky feelings, right? Clouds. You can't really grasp them. But the thoughts quite often come in words, or they can. They're not always, but they eventually kind of bubble up into verbalized words. And so if they say something like, he's not here, he's not here, he's not here, then I might say something like, I know. And just acknowledge. I think that's a lot of compassion to say, I know, I feel you, I understand you. And then I can also say, are you sure? Are you sure he's not here? Like, you can say he's not physically here. That's, that's what loss feels like when you miss his physical presence. But what about all the love that we shared? Or what about all of the ways that he influenced and impacted and changed me in my life, and these changes that aren't, I can't undo my life that I shared with him. I can't go back to who I used to be. I'm just a different person because of what I shared with him. So in some senses, you can say that to the extent that I am a changed person, he or his energy is still with me. So, and that's kind of a whole other conversation, but that's just an example of how I learned to listen, to deeply listen to my feelings, not reject them, to accept them, to hold them. And in the deep listening part is the compassion, but the deep listening always reveals more. And so as I learned to hold space for my own grief and for my own sorrow and for my own anger and whatever, it's automatic that I do for you, that I do for my children, that I do for my students or the community. And through the book now, hopefully I do for the reader as well. And because the space, the spaciousness and the mindfulness, it's not mine. It's not mine as in it will never belong to a person. It's not possessed by any person or place or culture or religion even. The mindfulness and the spaciousness is it's universal and it's always here. And as long as it's universal and it's always here, it's not always here just for me and not for you. It's always here for me and for you and for all of us. But sometimes we all need to be reminded of that, yeah?
Yeah.
So when you're having a shitty day and you're forgetting all of the spaciousness of your heart, but you have a friend or you have someone that's next to you that's holding space for you, that doesn't even need to say anything or do anything. But you're connected in that space. You're not ever alone. So,
yeah. I try to give people a little more space these days. Because speaking of the internal dialogue, and you've taken us to such a beautiful place, I don't want to take us back, but it's not always about me. The internal dialogue is not always about me. Sometimes it's about other people. Maybe somebody's in my way, and I think are you in my way on purpose? Why are you doing this to me? And as you can tell, I have a hard time with crowds. But then I recently lost a friend and went to his wake last Sunday, actually. And coming back, I'm kind of in a daze and not, still processing the whole thing. And, the next day I'm taking a walk and I'm still in a daze and I'm trying to process and I'm not looking where I'm going. And I realize I'm walking in front of people and getting in their way and making sure to stay on the sidewalk because at that point I could just walk out into traffic. It's not like I'm just going to walk like a zombie into traffic, but if I'm not paying attention, and I realized I wasn't paying attention and I was aware that I was spacing out. And then I thought, I've seen other people act like this before. Mm-hmm. And they're not trying to be a jerk. Maybe they got something on their mind.
Right.
And it made me think, you never know what other people are dealing with.
Exactly.
Because there's no neon sign that says, hey, Tracy just went to a funeral,
Right.
Or there's no neon sign that said, Tracy just got divorced or, just
got widowed.
Yeah. Or just lost all his money.
Has a handicapped child.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not apparent when you just see a person. And so I'm trying to be more compassionate with other people around me. And I'm still on this journey. Like I
Yeah,
feel like I'm a
we
baby
all are.
taking baby
Yeah.
steps, you know. But it's obviously I have a different approach than you, but I love your approach, and I love hearing it. And I'm going to listen back to this segment again too. Like,
But that's what I mean is that you don't have to necessarily be a yoga, meditation practitioner or anything. Life will show you. Life will show you. And you will complain. You will complain away until you realize that you're not making yourself any more comfortable by
yeah,
complaining. And then you learn, oh, that doesn't work. Okay, so if I don't complain, what do I do? A lot of times we just try to discipline ourselves. And sometimes the discipline is good, it's necessary, it works. But other times the discipline gets overdone and you get to be mean to yourself. And that doesn't last either. Right?
no. It gets exhausting.
Yeah.
Eventually.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think that's where my love lies, is just in this space, the universal space, where I find solace, and I know that when you need peace, that's where you find it too, and that it's always accessible. It's not ever far away. You just have to unlearn some of the crap that you put in your own way. And by crap, I mean the assumptions like, oh, he shouldn't be in my way, or I should have had all the money, or I shouldn't have lost this job, or he shouldn't have died so young, or whatever you want to say. But these are thoughts. They're only thoughts.
Shoulda, coulda, woulda.
Shoulda, coulda, woulda.
My mother always had a saying like, don't say, I forget how she said it, but like shoulda, coulda, woulda is like, it's not helping. Like,
Right.
Another friend said, don't should all over me.
That's a good way to put it too. But then people are shitting all over themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's the only one that really matters.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I think one thing I've tended to put people on a pedestal, and when you do that, they eventually fall off, right? Like,
Yeah.
She's a goddess, or he's a rock star, and he can't do anything wrong. And then you find out they're human. It's like, oh, you're just another person like me. Like, how dare you? And I think part of that disappointment started in my mind, putting them on a pedestal that they didn't even ask for.
Sure.
Right? And this other person has no idea that I put them on a pedestal, and has no idea that they fell off, and now no idea why I'm being a jerk around them. Like,
right.
There's like, what's up with this guy?
Right.
But in the meantime, I've got all this turmoil in my head. Not every day. I don't want to freak out my listeners, especially my family listens to this podcast. I love you guys, by the way. But when those events can happen, when those disappointments can happen, and if I linger on it or whatever, I realize I set that up. Right.
Sure.
That person didn't do anything to me. They have no idea what I'm going through.
How does that make you feel when you realize you set it up?
Free.
Good.
Because then I realize, like, my peace of mind doesn't depend on another person.
Yeah, it should feel free and empowering at the same time. And I just ask that because, and knowing myself, and also, having spoken to probably hundreds of students, sometimes in the beginning, it feels like, shit.
That's
like,
true too.
What?
Yeah.
It's my fault.
Well, the first time,
yeah.
The first time, it's like, oh my God, now, and I'm one of those people. So this program I'm doing is called 75 Hard. 75 days, 2 workouts a day. Mm-hmm. One has to be outside, no matter what. So if it's raining, snowing, whatever, you still got to do it.
You're currently doing it?
Currently doing it. I'm on, like, what's today? The 29th?
Yeah.
I'm on day 29. Yeah. And so it's not necessarily like a workout program, even though it includes workouts, but it's a mental toughness program. Uh-huh. And one of my problems is mental toughness. I'll seek out the easy way to do something,
Really?
But I've also found the other weird thing is, Chinese and Japanese are probably the 2 hardest languages to learn. And when somebody said, like, you're not going to learn Japanese starting in your 20s, you're too old, you're not going to learn it. Well, guess what? I can read and write Japanese. I can read the Nikkei Shimbun. I do software presentations in Japanese to lawyers. Okay, so I'm not a schmuck, but I took the hardest language and said, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
And then I passed the bar exam, became a lawyer, got my license, you know. I went after the hardest things, but I did that so I could rest later. Well, once I know Japanese, I'll just be rich, right? I got my law license. Well, I should be rich now, right? Doesn't work that way. That's the start. It's like you just got your driver's license.
Yeah.
You haven't got anywhere.
Yeah.
You just got the license. That's it. So I'm ambitiously lazy, and I shouldn't say that anymore. I'm not anymore. I actually seek out hard things to do because I know it makes me stronger mentally and emotionally. So,
but what do you want to do with a strong mind and strong emotions?
well, one thing is I abhor weakness in myself. I'm compassionate with other people who's like, a friend comes over to Japan and says, "Hey, Tracy, can you read the menu for me? I can't read Japanese at all." I'm like, "Yeah, sure. You know, I'll read that for you. I'll help you order dinner, you know?"
Wait. You see that as a weakness?
No. I see that as like, I've learned something. I have a skill where I can help somebody.
Yeah.
In myself, if I can't read that, I would feel like a weakling.
Oh, so you don't judge others
No,
for
I don't
their
judge
weakness,
others. No,
but you do judge it in yourself.
Really, like if I see somebody try to do push-ups and they get to like 50.
Dude, if you just took care of the self-judgment, you wouldn't have to do the workout.
Yeah, I judge myself. You nailed it.
Yeah, I would take care of that, and then you don't have to
nailed it.
put yourself through 75 days of hell.
No, but no, it's not hell actually. It's not hell actually.
You're talking to someone who used to wake up at 2:45 a.m. to do 2.5 hours of solid practice daily for years. Okay,
Right.
so there's that.
So, but you don't think of it as torture, do you? Right?
No, I did
Right?
not think of it as
Right?
torture. Other people thought so.
Well, it's funny because like people look at me and I always thought like the word in Japanese, "Otsukaresama desu," like "tsukarete nayo." Like I enjoy doing this, you know.
Sure.
But, so when people say, you know, oh boy, you know, you put all this effort into this project, like, oh, that must have been so hard. It's like, no, I loved it.
Yeah.
Almost every minute. I mean, there's,
Yeah.
you know, no project is 100%, you know, peaches and cream, but I did it because I wanted to.
Yeah, that's
and
awesome.
I freaking loved it. You
Yeah.
know, with other people, if they don't have that same vision, so if somebody doesn't have the vision or whatever, you know, you have that made you wake up at 2:00 in the morning, they look at that as like hell week, like going through Navy SEAL training. It's like, why do you torture yourself?
Yeah.
But I'm sure you woke up and said, I want to do this, right?
I'm thinking. I know for a fact that I wanted to do it, that I never complained about it. Rain or shine, snow or typhoon, I did it anyway. And there are still things that I learned from it. I think I also did it because of a belief that that was the best way to move forward. I later learned that it worked at the time and then it didn't work later because it gave me tremendous discipline, which I treasure. But I was not compassionate toward myself not on every single one of those mornings, you know? I guess you could say I took a very masculine and sometimes even mean approach to my practice. Yes, I just admitted that I did yoga in a mean way. Which shouldn't be, you know?
I'm doing yoga at myself.
Yeah, and then, of course, I turned the pages and I learned that I needed softness, I needed flexibility of mind, and come back to the middle.
Mm-hmm. And we're coming up on, it's just about time to wrap up, but what I like about, like, you know, first of all, you have such an interesting story, and you're obviously somebody who's put a lot of effort into what you do, and you love it, and have this great community. And but also you're just so able to be open about who you are and that you're human. Because when I see somebody like, and you are very photogenic, and in real life you're very striking, but like I see like, okay, there's Mae on the cover of a magazine, and I would think like, her life must be perfect. I mean, look at her, right? Look at you, like, look at her. Oh, she's beautiful. Wow, she looks great. She's really good at yoga. Everything must be perfect. When I sit down and talk to you, I realize, oh, you're a human being too. Like you have things you like and don't like, and you know, it still takes work to, you know, move forward.
Yeah, I think it kind of makes me sick actually when it's like only presented in a certain way and it's not real or it's not whole. So, for my own comfort and my own peace of mind, I prefer to be open about who I am. It doesn't mean that you have to expose yourself in every way to everyone. It just means that I'm open and available to sharing when asked. But particularly in terms of like, you know, living more authentically and in terms of open self-expression. I've been keenly aware of that because, and this is a total blanket statement, so total generalization, but sometimes in Japanese culture, these handicapped and widowed and the poverty stricken and the sick, the diseased, the old, they get set aside.
Yeah.
People don't really like to, yeah, like death and dying. People, it seems to make people quite uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And not just Japan, death and dying like everywhere in the world, except for maybe like India and Nepal and stuff where they do their funerals ceremonies openly. But I knew that I was widowed so young, you know, in my late 30s. So I knew that I didn't want to live the rest of my life in hiding, like as some big sore spot that people aren't allowed to ask me about or something. You know, just last month I was in the United States on a summer vacation, and I was on this beach in San Diego. My son and I, we were playing at the beach, and then afterwards we wanted to wash our feet off, the sand off our feet. So we were lining up at the public shower, and there were a bunch of other people, not really lining up, you know, Southern California people are just kind of like crowding around, right? And there was an amputee. He didn't have a leg beneath his thigh, beneath his right thigh. And he had a surfboard in one arm. So he had just been surfing. And then in his other hand, he had a sock for his one foot, but he accidentally dropped the sock, and it was like a little inconvenient for him to reach down and pick it up. And so another girl next to him helped to pick the sock up, but this girl obviously had Down syndrome, right? And she had her boogie board. And then right at that moment, some other dude turned toward the amputee man and said, yo, dude, so what happened to your leg, man? And the guy was like, oh yeah, this is years ago, but it was like this big machinery accident, man, and it really sucked at first, and I thought life sucked at first, but then I still wanted to surf, yo. And then I learned that there's like amputee surfing, so I can still surf, and so now it's pretty cool, man. And then, you know, and then people just kind of like start clapping, or they go, right, cool, dude, you know, keep it up, sort of a thing. Like, you know, like kudos to him for just romping on and enjoying life. And if you look at me, I don't wear any of my handicaps in a visible manner, but I have been through a few scars in my life. And I appreciate that. I appreciate him getting back up and surfing again. I appreciate the other girl picking up her boogie board and doing her thing. I appreciate the guy that didn't hold back and just was like blurting out, hey, so what happened to your leg? You know what I mean? Like in many cultures, it's so hard for people to just look into my eyes and be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. What happened to your husband?" Like, you know what I mean? Just because it's like so culturally taboo or something.
Yeah.
But sometimes when you treat something or someone like a sore spot, it's in your eyes and it's not actually on them. You know? And so it's a curious issue to become so aware of not, well, who you are, who I am. That's most central. But then you also ask, I ask myself, through what lens am I looking at the world? You know, when you look at an amputee, do you feel sorry for him? Do you pity him? You know, if you got to ask him a question, what do you want to say? You know, do you want to say what happened to him, or do you want to say, how'd you get back up on the board again? You know, like, and so it's kind of like similar to that Jugad point, where, presented with life in front of you today. Who are you, and how do you approach the next moment? You know, I like to approach my life as openly as possible, and I should hope that as long as I am open in my heart to my life, that I am open to see you for who you are, and for your pains and your growths, and for your learning, and for your quote unquote shortcomings, like, aren't we all human?
Yeah.
You know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, wonderful. Mae, thank you so much. So before we go, I don't want to forget to ask you about, social media presence, website, etc.
Right. So please be invited to find me on my Instagram account, which is MaeYoshikawa. My studio is Veda Tokyo, and you can find us at vedatokyo.com. And we offer programs like meditation, yoga, zazen, mostly in Japanese, but also some English classes available, and more coming from November. So hopefully we have a platform to connect there as well.
Nice. And that'll be in the show notes too. So thank you, everybody.
It's my joy.
Great time to wrap this up. And I really enjoyed this. I feel like we could just keep going because I enjoy it so much, but we'll have to do it again sometime, okay?
Sounds great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And thanks, everybody, for listening. Bye now.